Hello and welcome to today's WorkSafe Month webinar, How to Retain and Attract a Mentally Healthy Team. I'm Stephanie Morawski from WorkSafe Tasmania and I will be your moderator. Before we start, please take a moment to read the following slide about information received today. I'll now go over housekeeping. Here is a screenshot of the attendee control panel. You should see something that looks like this on the right hand of your screen. You're likely listening in using your computer speaker system by default. If you would prefer to listen over the phone, just select telephone in the audio pane and the dial-in information will be displayed. Webcams and audience microphones will not be used in today's webinar. Questions will be taken at the end of today's presentation. Please use your questions pane on your control panel to type and submit your questions. Finally, today's webinar is being recorded. I would now like to introduce your presenter, Bianca Welsh, co-owner, restaurateur and HR manager from Stillwater Restaurant, 7 Rooms and Black Cow Bistro. Bianca is a Launceston restaurateur who specialises in people, relationships, service, development and all things mental health. Her 3 businesses employ 60 people. Having been a business owner since she was 21, Bianca has experienced all sorts of challenges and triumphs. She has a number of national and local awards under her belt, such as Young Restaurateur of the Year, Young Professional of the Year, and the Tourism Minister's Young Achiever of the Year. Bianca's spare time is spent in local for-purpose boards, including Design Tasmania, the Launceston Chamber of Commerce and Tourism, Northern Tasmania, as well as being a mum. Bianca has completed a Bachelor of Behaviour Science in 2018 and is passionate about mental wellbeing. Welcome, Bianca.
Hello, thank you very much, and thank you all for those who are attending today or listening later. So Stephanie has described a little bit about me. I guess to explain a little bit about what my day-to-day role is, it's in all human resources areas, so recruitment, training, development, obviously business development, communications, general operations of the restaurant. So I'm on the restaurant floor a couple of times a week, and most importantly is a lot about well-being. So we've supported a lot of people in our workplace suffering a range of mental illnesses to poor mental health. Some of those examples include depression, anxiety, bipolar, substance abuse, panic attacks, eating disorders, suicide, suicidal ideation, spousal suicide, unwanted pregnancies, breakups, miscarriages, divorces, terminal illnesses, cancer diagnoses, death, trauma, sexual assault and rape. So we've been through a lot with our team, and I hope that I can impart a few little tips and advice to you to help support your teams through some difficult situations that aren't really going away. The prevalence of this is not abating. So our webinar today, how to retain and attract a mentally healthy team. Without one, you do not have the other in terms of having positive workplace culture. A good workplace culture is how and where this all begins. A positive workplace culture with a mentally healthy focus is where you will have an advantage against your competitors, where you'll be able to boost and maintain a healthy team morale, retain staff, attract new ones who fit the culture and team, and save on costs such as recruiting, advertising, training, and mediation. This all, of course, needs to be built on the foundations you've hopefully already got in place. That is good leadership, a positive outlook, customer and team-focused workplace, open communication, and clear and concise communication. Statistically, our workplace industry average for hospitality is, some reports say 70%, some say 80% for turnover. So it is extremely high in the hospitality industry. When we took over as business owners, we were probably sitting at about 85%, and these days we sit below 30%, which certainly helps in many different ways. Quick little pop quiz. People seek out the company of others, even strangers, in times of stress. Do you think this is true or false? And Stephanie will put up the ability for you to have a think about that for a moment.
I'll close the poll shortly.
Thanks.
So I'll close the poll, Bianca, and share the results.
Interesting results there, 60% true and 40% false. And the answer is true. Research has shown that external threat causes stress and leads people to affiliate with others who are facing or have faced a similar threat. I think in our COVID times, that isolation during this and all the stress that has come with this, unprecedented era is a very real aspect, and I think it's something we all need to be aware of in the workplace. So about work culture, we're gonna touch a little bit on work culture, and this is all in my experience. It's certainly not from a textbook. We're then going to go into a bit about mental health and illness. We're going to talk quite a bit about the biopsychosocial model of psychology, and then a couple of practical tips and things that we do in our workplace that have really improved retention and attraction for us. So work culture has become one of the most important topics in business and is now recognised as being something that can make or break your business. Good culture gives a competitive advantage. Your customers and stakeholders will notice this and they'll want to be part of it either as a consumer, partner, future employee. It is a business challenge and not just a HR challenge. I think the misconception is that it's only the HR department's job to keep everyone happy and well. It is everyone's responsibility, especially the supervisor, manager, and the owner team. It is difficult to measure and manage. A Deloitte survey found in Australia, we ranked the highest for placing importance on culture in the world. And the fish rots from the head down. Good culture must come from the top. So, what does contribute to work culture? And as mentioned, this is from my experience. And a great work culture will ultimately lead to happy, engaged staff, thus a great customer experience. So a few points, we'll go through, I think, 6. Trust. Trust has to go both ways. Trust in the team to do their job, but also they have trust in their leadership team to do the right thing by them. Trust also includes your teams having the ability to come to you with a problem, be that a mental health problem, and knowing you will be there for them and try to help them where possible. Inclusion. This is in regards to decision making. Research shows this. If people are included in decisions, which it could be a change in procedure, a change to their own roster or working hours, for example, they will be more engaged and on board, and they'll take ownership of the decisions made for the business and perhaps for their personal circumstances. Collaboration. So include key people within the team on development, invite them to meetings, invite them to submit their ideas and feedback, and follow through with those ideas and feedback. Don't just make it tokenistic, make it known that you do value their thoughts and that you can implement them if they are suitable. Be proactive. Don't let the culture slip. Don't think when it's good, it will stay that way. It's an everyday job, constant checking in, not letting anything fester, setting boundaries and expectations from the get-go and upholding them and maintaining them every day. This means nipping things in the bud when you see it. An example in my workplace in a restaurant, it could be something as simple as the way a table is set, For those that aren't in hospitality, the blade of a knife should face in towards the fork, which is on the right. And if I saw a team member, it could mean it's such a minimal thing to really easily overlook and not bother telling someone about. But I always make sure that I tell them straight away that no, I'd prefer it to go the other way, and explain why. Human behaviour will always take the path of least resistance and take the path that is easiest and most familiar. It'd be safe to assume most people here today would drive the exact same way to work every day and can do so without even thinking about it. It's almost the way our minds work. We create pathways for tasks we do often, and once we've gone down that pathway once, twice, 3 times, it becomes harder to deviate from that path. Our brains, however, are not static, and they are plastic, which means we can retrain our brain to do amazing things, such as medical feats where people have taught themselves to walk again after a spinal injury, speak again after a massive stroke, and other amazing physical triumphs. Our brains can also retrain the way we think, how we can regulate our emotions, habits, etc. By reinforcing good behaviour or the correct procedure first and early on, you will be less likely to have problems later down the track. Put in the effort first, and in the early days, you will reap the benefits later. It's quite similar, I know this sounds awful, to training dogs. By reinforcing good behaviour, you establish stronger pathways than to focus on the bad behaviour. Innovative. Now, this is not in regards to business innovation of your services, etc. This is about the way your teams interact. This could be creating different and thoughtful procedures or incentives for your team. Could be a sales Olympics, for example, where we award a bottle of wine for the biggest sales in a service, or a voucher for making the most sales in a night. It could be a team building exercise. For example, we had the front of house swap with the back of house, where the back of house, the kitchen team had to direct the front of house to plate up a dish without physically helping, so only through verbal communication. And then they swapped, so then the kitchen team came out the front and practiced setting a table and bringing a dish to a table, again with no physical help, with verbal help. And this was incredible. You could see the cohesion immediately after and for quite some time after. And it was just really great for the team to step into someone else's shoes for a moment, and then to be more compassionate through service. So say if the kitchen is ringing the bell to come and pick up a meal to deliver to the table, and vice versa, the waiter's waiting for a dish to come up, and you're all getting a bit tetchy with each other, it was just a great experience for the team to do that, to understand each other a bit better. And it could also be a social event. It's also identifying when and how this is appropriate, and perhaps for what teams might need some morale boosting. It could be across, or it could be cross-sectional with your departments. Understanding, for me, is the key to all of this. It is the key to attracting, retaining and maintaining a great team, and what essentially will be the rest of this webinar. Understanding in our workplaces in this day and age means we need to understand the person just a little bit more than was required, say, 20 years ago or even 10 years ago. The best example I can give is when I was a new business owner. I was maybe a year in, and I had an amazing waiter. They were a casual and an excellent worker, exceptional. Turn up to work on time, were excellent at their job, gave 110%, and suddenly their behaviour began to change, and they became unreliable, forgetful, a bit vague, and the performance was just going rapidly downhill. It became known to us that this person was suffering from an eating disorder, and the binging and purging was happening at work and on shift. I really wanted to do something about it, and I really wanted to address the problem rather than let this person go, or just to write them out of the roster, which is so often what happens in hospitality, unfortunately. And so I stressed about it. I researched what I could do, and it took me quite some time to come up with the courage to ask her what was wrong. Ultimately, it did go great. There was a bit of denial to begin with, but fortunately, this person sent me a very long text message the next day after our chat. And the chat was as simple as, you know, what can I help with anything? Are you okay? We've noticed this behaviour, and is there anything we can do to help? This person got help, admitted that it was a problem from their younger days, and they were going through some stressful situations at home, and it had reared its head, and this person was going back to their doctor to get some help, and they're actually now a doctor themselves. They stayed with us for another 10 or so months before going off to med school, and it was a really great example of what can be done within the workplace. And that's actually what led me to going to study psychology, because I wanted to learn more and understand more how the mind was working. So understanding, is the key. Pop quiz. The accumulation of daily hassles does more to make people sick than catastrophes or major life changes. Do you think this is true or false?
We'll close the poll shortly. I'll close the poll, Bianca, and share the results.
Excellent. That's a good result. 96% true and 4% false. Because that is, we can go to the slides. Because that is, of course, as you're all not surprised, true. Commuting hassles, arguments with friends, and other micro stresses contribute more to our levels of stress than larger but less frequent stresses. So it's safe to say, for example, COVID-19 has exacerbated this, and with changes to our daily lives, such as hand sanitizing, signing into places, making sure you're 1.5 meters away from someone, would certainly contribute to the micro stresses on top of all the other micro stresses we experience every day. And again, just something to be cognizant of with our teams. So we're going to talk a little bit about mental health and illness, and I'm sure most of you would be aware of this. I think there's been some really great education in this space, but we're going to touch on it a little bit again. So mental health is a state of well-being in which every individual realises his or her own potential, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to her or his community. Whereas mental illness is a health problem that significantly affects how a person feels, thinks, behaves, and interacts with other people. I think it's really important that we use these terms correctly in the workplace to differentiate from. Well, when you break down each part of the definition of mental health, this is quite a difficult task for anyone to stay on top of their own mental health. Promoting good mental health and being proactive in your business can aim to minimise the risks of mental illness, but provide an environment should someone be suffering from a bout of mental illness or is not on top of their own mental health, and hopefully aim to minimise the negative effects of this for not only the individual, but for the team and for the business. The World Health Organization's comparison of mental illness to a physical illness give examples such as moderate depression being akin to asthma or chronic hepatitis, severe PTSD to paraplegia, and schizophrenia to quadriplegia. This is just a little example of how severe a mental illness can be to someone's physical being. So work can support mental health, giving purpose, meaning, and connectedness. However, work can be a stressor in mental ill health. Think of mental health as a continuum which can fluctuate between states of mental flourishing and languishing, regardless of a diagnosis of mental illness. The Productivity Commission inquiry into mental health did a report into what makes up a mentally healthy workplace. So positive workplace culture This means a place where people feel good about coming to work and everyone's encouraged and supported. Risks to mental health are managed, so stress, heavy workloads, unrealistic deadlines, poor communication, these and other factors can all contribute to anxiety and depression, and it's up to managers and leaders to keep them in check. People with mental health conditions are supported. Helping employees to stay at or return to work has clear benefits both for the individual and the business. And a zero tolerance approach to discrimination. As well as being a legal requirement, protecting employees from discrimination encourages a diverse workforce and ensures everyone gets a fair go. So what is the cost? And I'm sure you've heard many of these stats before. It never hurts to have them embedded in our minds. So the statistics are that we estimated 45% of Australians will suffer a mental illness at some point during their lifetime. And in any 1 year, 1 million will have depression and 2 million will have anxiety. Predicted impact. The mental ill health impacts greatly on the economy and productivity. With early signs, it will worsen dramatically with COVID-19. A draft report of the Productivity Commission suggests ill health and suicide are costing Australia up to $180 billion per year. And the St Luke's report in early 2020 suggests that lost productivity alone is estimated to $12,000 per person per year to the total cost of mental illness in this state. And unfortunately, in the St Luke's report, found amongst the 25 to 34 year age group, Tasmania is the most overweight, oldest, sickest, poorest, least literate, most disabled state with the highest number of youth suicides and the second lowest life expectancy in the country. So they're pretty awful statistics that we're really working against. So I really think that employers can be contributing to improving these statistics. So where do you start? Educate yourself a little first about mental health and mental illness. I'm not saying everyone needs to go and get a degree in psychology, but a little bit of understanding goes a long way. TED Talks are not so much, going through these resources. So there's some really great online resources such as Beyond Blue, Black Dog Institute and Lifeline. There's some excellent documentaries such as The Mind Explained. There's some great podcasts. One I enjoy listening to is All in the Mind. Health Speak, which is a fantastic locally produced by Penny Terry from Healthy Tasmania. Really great, short, sharp, and some really great tips in there as well. And The Imperfects, which is a really great podcast I've just only recently discovered. It's some really great, I guess, case studies, talking to individual people about their experiences. There are some amazing books, which is an endless array of amazing books. And there's a couple of TED Talks I've just popped up there. One from Celeste Headley about how to have a better conversation, and one from Amy Cuddy about how your body language may shape who you are. You may have heard of these or watched them already yourself. I just think that they're a really great example of how such a small thing such as how your body language or your pose can change the way you think, and how you can have better conversations. And I think that TED Talk is a really great one for managers to learn a couple of techniques about how to have those really hard conversations with their team. Another pop quiz. People's very quick judgments are not influenced by a stereotype unless they actually believe the stereotype to be true. Is this true or false?
We'll close the poll shortly. I'll close the poll, Bianca, and share the results.
48% true and 52% false. Not too bad. And the answer is, false. Even very brief exposure to a member of a stereotyped group can activate the stereotype about the group, even if they do not believe the stereotype. And again, I think this relates really well to particularly depression and anxiety and having assumptions about what that means for people, and I guess stereotyping everyone into a box about mental illness. Just something to be aware of in our own minds. So we're going to talk now about the biopsychosocial model of psychology, and this is something that I really loved learning about during my degree, and something that is based, a lot of research is based in this area now, and can just help you frame your views and perhaps the way you approach a situation or your team, being a little bit more aware of these things. So the biopsychosocial perspective is the view that an illness or a medical condition is the product of the complex interplay of biological, psychological, and social factors. So you can see we'll start with biological, you've got physical health, genetic vulnerability, immune stress response, emotions. You'll see emotions will cross over a little bit into other areas. You've got psychological, self-esteem, attitudes and beliefs, perceptions. We'll talk a little bit more about that. And then in social and environmental, you've got the peer group, you've got their work environment, the school. Socioeconomic status can have a really big impact on the way people think and act, and family circumstances can have a huge impact. It was thought originally that mental illness was just a chemical imbalance in your brain. It is now understood that there are many factors as to why someone may suffer from poor mental health or mental illness. When you put all these things into the mix, you realise how complicated it can be to actually be mentally well. And I think until we can frame it instead that being mentally well is actually the anomaly, and that mental illness or poor mental health is actually the norm, I think we'll be able to go leaps, we'll be able to move ahead with the mental health conversation. It is now understood today emotions and stress contribute to, maintain or aggravate physical conditions such as asthma, ulcers and a number of diseases. Let's use an example such as coronary heart disease. Studies have shown the most predictive factor of developing heart disease is having a certain personality type, being a type A personality, which describes a person who is competitive, driven, hostile and ambitious. In one study, when teaching those with coronary heart disease to curtail their anger, this was a long study, longitudinal, they found 37% decrease in deaths from heart attacks than to other patients. Coronary heart disease is also correlated with work stress, financial stress, and other major life events, not to mention job stress and dissatisfaction. Of course, things can work the other way, where a physical disorder can cause a great deal of stress. We will now just break these down a fraction more, looking at it very briefly in two ways, generally and specifically to your workplace, in terms of, I guess, how I've experienced perhaps these factors coming into the workplace and a person's performance. Once you come to understand an individual has really limited or almost no control over many of these factors, it can help to put that person into context and really help with understanding where that person is coming from. Viewing mental health through this lens offers a more holistic view and assists workplaces to identify areas where both prevention and intervention strategies can be meaningfully applied. This model is also used for the diagnostics statistics manual for disorders, so the DSM, where that is what professionals use to diagnose people with a mental illness. It is based on this model, and a huge amount of research has gone into this model. So the biological, you can see in there, in general, that might be a genetic predisposition. For example, some studies show bipolar disorder is among the most genetically influenced of all mental disorders, with some studies suggesting it is as high as 85%. Brain imaging suggests there is increased activity in the structures related to emotion and decreased activity in the prefrontal cortex. Stressful life events may then increase the risk of a manic episode, thus may be resulting in a psychological disorder. This is a strong example of the complex interplay of the biological, sociological, and psychological factors. You've got the immune stress response. That can be the flight, fight, or freeze response, which we know is just it's just something we tend to be born with and might not rear its head until we find ourselves in a stressful scenario. And of course, physical health. I've had a particular team member that's had quite a bad knee problem. And until I actually asked this person, was everything okay, and actually sat down with them away from the restaurant floor, did they actually open up that they were having some problems with a knee issue. And we were able then to come up with a strategy together of how to mitigate that, and there was a huge improvement in that person's performance and attitude. In a work context, so lifestyle can have a huge impact. So do they stay up late at night? Are they an active person? Are they more of a gamer? Are they quite social? All these factors can have a huge impact. Diet can really impinge, I feel, on people's performance and their ability to contribute at work. I've had a vegan before that's not looked after their health very well, and they were very vague and just they needed some help, and directing them to maybe think about what they were consuming and be a little bit healthier, and made actually a huge difference. And emotions, we are all biologically tend to express our emotions in certain ways or feel things a certain way, and you'll see that this will cross over into another area as well. Psychological, so you've got the general attitudes and beliefs. For example, those who are optimistic have a better immune response and have fewer physical complaints. Perceptions, the way we perceive the world, differs from person to person, for example. Such as that crazy colour thing that was going around on socials a while back. Of those that saw it were asked, was the dress blue with black or was the dress white with gold? And this applies to everyday life, such as, was that person a little rude in the way that they asked that question? You could ask two people that were both there at the exact same time, and they might have interpreted it two very different ways. You've got self-esteem and social skills. In a work context, what I've experienced, coping skills can have a huge variance. Response to reward, some are really driven by rewards and others just aren't at all. So you've got to find a way of keeping them motivated according to their preference, their psychological response to reward. Temperament, they say that we are a tabula rasa when we're born, that is, we are a blank slate. However, they do say, some theories say that temperament is something that we're born with. We either come out screaming and not happy with the world, or we come out a bit more content with the world, and that's just built into us. And again, emotions come into it, the psychological factors as well. We've got the social and environmental. So in general, you've got your socioeconomic status. There's a lot of research around that, which I won't touch on now. There's a huge amount out there about that. Peer groups, I've always found that has a huge impact. We all can think of maybe a friend, or even our own children's, a friend with children, or our own children's examples of perhaps when they've fallen into the wrong or right group, peer group. You've got your family circumstances and culture. Culture's a huge one. I've got a little example of a study here in terms of cultural differences. So there was a study with a handful of pens where the majority were black and a minority were a different colour, such as blue. People from different cultures were asked to select a pen. People from Western cultures chose the uncommon pen colour, whereas those from East Asian cultures chose the majority pen colour. This study went further, where mood was then manipulated to positive or negative by playing either an upbeat piece of classical music for the positive condition or a depressing classical piece for the negative mood condition. Westerners, if they were in a negative mood, would choose the uncommon colour, so they stayed the same if they were in a negative mood. Whereas it was the opposite for the East Asian participants, and if in a positive mood, they were more likely to choose the uncommon pen. The takeaway from this is positive moods make individuals more likely to act in ways that deviated from their norms of their cultures. And interpret that as you will. That, I guess, depends case by case and situation by situation. And then, of course, what I've experienced in a work context is trauma. You never know when it will rear its head, and I feel like that's just becoming an increasing issue for society. Interpersonal relationships, obviously within the workplace, can have a huge impact. Grief, of course, and substance use effects. Another little pop quiz. So although flawed, job interviews consistently make for better hiring decisions. True or false?
We'll close the poll shortly. I'll close the poll, Bianca, and share the results.
Very good, 62% true and 38% false. That's a very interesting result. So the answer, scientifically, is actually false. Although interviews may lessen the tendency among employers to make simple, stereotyped judgments, they often lack predictive validity, which means they basically produce poor selection decisions, in part because the applicant will be boosting their presentation and aiming to meet the expectations and the bias of the interviewer. Alternatives for a more scientific approach, meaning a researched approach, is to use standardized tests of cognitive ability, personality, and integrity as part of the selection process. However, most of us would not have access to those resources. Instead, ensuring you have a structured interview will assist, such as specific questions all applicants are asked, and a follow-up interview with another colleague involved in recruiting can certainly help. And to just, I should have summarised, so about the biopsychosocial model. I just think if you can look at an individual sitting in front of you with that lens, perhaps if they're not performing or if something's not right with them, I think if you approach it in a biopsychosocial model way of being curious as to perhaps, is there something else to this issue? It can perhaps be a more understanding way and hopefully retain that person because you're able to be a little bit more compassionate and understanding perhaps of their situation. And I could talk all day about all different examples of those, but we don't have time for that. So we're just going to finish off with some practical advice, how to build a great work culture. Obviously, there are many, many ways to build a great work culture, lots of textbooks, advice and things out there about it. What has worked for us was to strategize at first. So have a concept and understanding of what we would define as a good work culture and where we ultimately wanted to be. Formalize our vision, mission, values, and objectives. Have these written down and articulated and constantly refreshing them and looking at them every couple of years, every few years. Our world is evolving rapidly, as we know. I think it's good to revisit these often. And as mentioned at the start, that the fish rots from the head down. So the management must be on board with the mission statement or the vision or the value or the objective, whatever your purpose or purpose statement you decide on, it must be endorsed and adhered to and understood by that top tier. Formalize your policy and philosophy. So we've created policies and procedures to ensure clarity for any of our team members. And so we do this in a formal induction. I also do this in the interview process. If I'm offering them a trial position, I will then explain our mental health policy, our awareness around it. And then when we do a formal induction, it's outlined in our handbook. We also ensure that we talk about it, normalize it, refresh on that. We, sending out our newsletters, I might touch on something about mental illness or good mental health, particularly seasonal. When we go into the winter months, I often try to emphasize for people to be ensuring that they're getting a bit of exercise and sunlight, trying to make sure that they're getting the right amount of sleep. And also don't forget recognition, and this is not just with the mental health stuff, but in general. The research is definitely out there, very strong, to show that people need to feel valued at work, and we need to recognise great work, great behaviour, great communication, reward it, promote it, publicise it, talk about it. That's a really important part. And most importantly is one of my biggest philosophies is do not leave your troubles at the door. I think it is unrealistic to ask for someone that is suffering from depression, anxiety, have had an argument with their partner on the way into work and are feeling a bit upset or angry about it. I think it's unrealistic for us to ask them to leave that at the door. And instead, we need to be able to have an environment where we can either talk about it and constructively manage it so that we can get the best out of everyone. Again, I can talk about examples and talk about that all day. You also need to humanize yourself. If you're having a bad day, you need to own it. I think we can all think of an example of someone that we've worked with, either current or past, that can get in a mood and you don't know what the mood is about, and you think, oh goodness, I've done something wrong. It's me. I've upset them. I've said something, and in actual fact, you find out that they got, their car got run into on the way to work, or it was actually something that is completely not to do with you, and it's something out of the workplace. I think when you humanize yourself and you say, as the boss, as the manager, as the supervisor, oh yeah, I'm having a bad day. I slept really bad last night, or look, I'm having these issues in my life, or I'm not feeling particularly, I'm feeling a bit depressed, to be honest. If you're able to talk about it, you open the door for others to be able to talk about it, and you create that safe environment. Identifying and maintaining good mental health in the workplace. So within the workplace, address a performance issue with a conversation about how they're feeling first and perhaps what's going on in their life. Pull them aside in a suitable place, away from other prying eyes or ears, and just have a general conversation about what's going on. And I can confidently say 99% of the time, if I've ever sat down with someone to just check in and see what's going on before I have the performance issue, 99% of the time they've opened up with what they feel comfortable to talk to me about, and we've been able to work through a situation together. Excellent communication. There needs to be a two-way street. So all of these things are great to have in place, but you must, that employee must understand that they need to be able to communicate what's going on with them. You can't help them unless A, they want help, and B, that they can communicate to you that they're not having a good day or that things are not right. That doesn't always happen, unfortunately, because some people can just be pretty poor communicators, but I've always asked that of them, that conversation perhaps going back a step of the performance issue and just having that conversation about how they're feeling, and you come up with a strategy of how we can mitigate that in the workplace. You need to, I've always asked them that they must be vocal about how they're feeling, and be preemptive and be proactive about that. So they can't tell me in the middle of a busy shift that they're not good because we're in the thick of it already. Halfway through dinner service, I can't do anything about it. If they're able to communicate that to me earlier on, I might be able to, I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but I might be able to change their role, and perhaps they have a smaller section, or they're able to work in a different area. And I realize I'm fortunate to have that flexibility in the workplace, but it could just be they just need that one little variance to get through that day. Have a channel that they're comfortable with, so it doesn't have to be you. It could be another supervisor or manager. It could be another full-time colleague that is just perhaps very good at this sort of thing and can assist them with being able to communicate it to the higher up in the chart. Just having it clear who is suitable to go and speak to. And perhaps a change in work hours, and hopefully this can be temporary, but if you offer this up, I've had 100% positive from this. If it just needs to be a little bit of a break, a little less, just for a short period of time, it will come back to you in spades. Outside the workplace, education on being proactive, and you can only be suggestive in these. Obviously you can't control what everyone's doing outside of the workplace, but if you're a little bit educated on what can contribute to good mental health, such as mindfulness, exercise, diet, getting the right amount of sleep, getting sunlight, self-care, all those sorts of things, you might be able to not diagnose, but might be able to just ascertain an aspect of their life that perhaps they might just need to be mindful of and perhaps work on. I think this is the last pop quiz, and I think we've got 2 more slides to go. Playing French music in a wine shop leads to an increase in purchases of French wine. True or false?
We'll close the poll shortly. I'll close the poll, Bianca, and share the results.
Very good, 78% true and 22% false. So the answer is true. Environmental cues can play a major role in determining our behaviour, and many of these cues operate outside of our conscious awareness. Again, relating back to how important the environment and the vibe and the communication, the things we say and do, can be observed subconsciously and taken in subconsciously. So what can you do in your workplace? An EAP is a really important thing to have in place. I realise some people are a bit skeptical about them and some people feel that they're a bit tokenistic, but I like that if there's not someone within the workplace that feels comfortable to be able to deal with these things, that there is a professional place for them to be able to get some help. And you can decide how many sessions that you pay for. So for our team, we do 3 that we cover. Other places do where their family can access it as well. That's something just to consider in-house. I mentioned before the social events or team building exercises and activities are really great. Mental health first aid course, I cannot recommend this more highly and more important. I could talk about it all day, how amazing and how every single person should have this course under their belt. It is as important, if not more important, than a physical first aid course, in my opinion, and something that I really think anyone here listening today should just go and consider and do a bit of research about. Regular management meetings, and a little tip is to not only talk about obviously business, but to just talk about your team. Perhaps it just needs to be discussed about to keep an eye on someone. If you've noticed XYZ, it might make the others a bit more aware. Or if someone is having a bit of a rough time, it might be good, you don't need to go into details, but it might be good to let everyone involved in management know, and they can, you know, make changes in the way perhaps they communicate or talk to them accordingly. And a really big one is know where to get help. You don't need to be their psychologist, counsellor, doctor, parent, all the things. You're still their boss and their colleague. Know the differences between a psychologist and a counsellor. Know the difference of going to the GP and being really explicit about how to get help for your mental health. Make it known that that person can ask explicitly that they're interested in getting a mental health plan. That's gone from 10 to 20 sessions a day, which the government just announced, which is amazing, with a professional psychologist. Know if there is in your area a really good Headspace or other free counselling service. Know the helplines. Just have an awareness of that you're not there to fix the problem. You are just there to help guide them to feel better, and assure them that they can feel better and that things will get better. I guess this is what I've just touched on, however. So you're probably thinking, I shouldn't get involved. It will feel like I'm prying. I don't have the time. What if I don't do anything? And what if I make it worse? To be honest, I've never had any problem in terms of trying to direct someone to get help. 99% of the time they'll thank you for it, and you will see almost an instant outcome. So don't be scared, I think, is the takeaway. And the final things are practice what you preach, be proactive, be compassionate, aces in their places, which is a great one I learnt when I was working at McDonald's when I was a teenager. There's no point in trying to push someone in a position or a spot that is not suitable to where they're at that current time. So aces in their places, I think, is a really good one. We all just want to be understood. That's you as an employer or a boss, manager. So that also means that the employee wants to be understood. Put each individual into context, and that really is about the biopsychosocial model. And to be curious as to why perhaps that person has changed in behaviour, perhaps why their performance has slipped or something's going on. Be curious as to why, because I promise you that there is a reason, and it might not be the reason that you think. It might actually be an external mental illness or mental health issue, and that you can actually turn that around. And I guess the last thing is that I missed it on the slide, is that everyone wants to feel valued. So don't forget to remind your team or your people that they're doing a great job, and to reinforce that good behaviour and those good habits. And any questions? We're into questions.
Thank you, Bianca. So there is some time to type your questions into the questions pane for Bianca today. So a question that has come through, Bianca. My experience is that people who are experiencing mental health problems are stressed and will sometimes strike out at others, such as people they work with, which can lead to bullying or trying to control others. How do you balance the needs of the people at work and the person who is experiencing mental health issues?
That can be a tricky area to navigate. I guess for me, that would go to the root of the problem, or the cause of the problem. So why is that person stressed? Is that something that can be managed in the workplace? Have they been vocal about their work conditions or their the details of their job or their role? I think getting to the root of the problem would be the first place to start. Then addressing the behaviour would be the next. If you don't see any, if you don't see that person give any information up as to why they're stressed or why they're behaving the way they are, I guess the next step would then be to address their behaviour, and then go through the to offer all the possible things you might have in place. That is either an EAP, perhaps there needs to be mediation, which I know can be a scary and expensive thing to do. And it can be risky because you might not have any positive outcome. I guess if it has to get to it, it has to get to it. Yeah, I hope that's answered the question, is to try to find out why that person is feeling particularly stressed. And it's probably a personal reason rather than a work reason. And that might be over a number of conversations. It's probably not going to come out in the first one. Yeah, it's a tricky one. I probably would need some more details in private to discuss that.
Thank you, Bianca. Just to let everyone know, there is still some time to type in questions for your presenter, Bianca Welsh. Please use your questions pane and submit your questions. A question, Bianca. What about when a worker refuses any offered assistance, support, etc., over a long period of time and continues to blame the employer for the way they feel?
Yeah, that's a really, really tricky one. I guess the best way you can do is document, not in a malicious way in terms of getting them out the door, but document the issues that they're having. And then on the other column, there's a great technique in cognitive behavioural therapy where you list all the reasons why. Say this is in regards to like irrational thoughts, like say you feel worthless, or yeah, you feel worthless, and so you write down in one column all the reasons and evidence as to why you feel that way, and then in the next column you write all the things that for evidence against. I think I don't know if that would make any difference, but to perhaps sit down with that person and go through together all the things that they've brought to your attention and the things that you've offered and tried and, you know, either changed that person in the workplace or all the things you've done to try to help the situation. Perhaps that could then look at help that person realise that the workplace isn't the issue, and perhaps it is their attitude towards the workplace and their situation. I guess it's getting creative, maybe doing a bit of research in terms of what might work in terms of doing activities or like questions with them that doesn't feel like that they're going off to see a counsellor or a psychologist, or, you know, like this one I've just given as an example. It could be trying to get a bit creative, and maybe that's outside of the workplace, to try to improve the situation, to try to get them to have that aha moment of going, oh, actually it's not the workplace, it's me. I need to take control of the situation and take control of my emotions. And that's a whole other talk, is the circle of control. And I find a lot of people try to control things that are outside their circle of control, such as other people's moods and you know, all the, I can't articulate it right now, whereas they're trying to, the things they have in their control are their own emotions, where they work, what they do, who they interact with, but they often are trying to control the things that are actually not within their control. So it's trying to get that person to somehow come around to it, But that's a really tricky one. That takes a lot of time and a lot of effort, unfortunately.
All right, thanks, Bianca. Just to end, to let you know a few comments that have also come through. So thanks, Bianca, great presentation. Again, great presentation, thank you. I found this session beneficial. So just on that note, today's webinar has also been recorded and will be made available at the end of WorkSafe month on the WorkSafe Tasmania YouTube page and also via the WorkSafe Tasmania website. As well, once you do leave today's webinar, you will receive a survey on the presentation. We do appreciate you providing us with your feedback. WorkSafe month runs until the end of October, so please do head to the worksafetasmonth.com.au website. Have a look at what other webinars we are running throughout the course of October. On behalf of WorkSafe Tasmania and the WorkCover Tasmania Board, thank you for joining us, and thank you, Bianca.
Thank you.